Evening, everybody. My name is Tony Vo, and I am president of the UMass Republican Club. Tonight we have some special guests with us. C-SPAN will be taping this event and rebroadcasting it in the near future, so I'd like to ask you to hold your questions until the end, at which point we will have a person walking around with a microphone. On behalf of the club, I wish to ask you to join me in welcoming Dr. David A. Yeagley to our campus. Dr. Yeagley is a direct descendant of Bad Eagle, who was the headman of an Antelope Comanche band. Dr. Yeagley holds advanced degrees in religion, music, and the fine arts. Always popular with his students, he taught at Oklahoma State University for 6 years until outed as a conservative. He apparently embarrassed the institution by encouraging the teaching of patriotism in the state's public schools. It was Dr. Yeagley that the Boston Herald's Don Fetter spoke of in his column of March 14, 2001, a column that suggested that colleges and universities should post their own signs. Conservative students should keep their opinions to themselves. Conservative faculty should put their conscience in a blind trust for the term of their association with this institution. The current regime of tenured radicals in academia truly hate America. From Rene Gonzalez in his intemperate comments about Pat Tillman's tragic death to Ward Churchill, the not native but truly anti-American activist, it sometimes seems that everyone hates America. There's a lot that you probably haven't heard on this campus, not the least of which is what it is like to be a patriotic American Indian. Please join me in welcoming such a man, Dr. David Yeagley.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to point out that we tried this before a couple of weeks ago, and I want you to know that your leaders of this club persevered and came and got me in the middle of a snowstorm at Hartford, and we drove up here and went out to eat, and we had a good time nonetheless. But I want you to know that these are dependable leaders you've got, and I take note of that. They persevered when they could have called it off. So, perseverance is a theme that I appreciate, and I'm going to relate a series of stories to you in which I will try to communicate to you what it means to persevere, as if students you don't already know. But when you get in the political world, active in the political world, you sometimes wonder if you're on the right track or not, especially if it's a new path where there aren't established names for you to reference, where there's not an organization that you can identify with. Sometimes perseverance, you think of people like William of Orange, who said that it is not necessary to hope in order to undertake, and it is not necessary to succeed in order to persevere. So I was impressed with that rock-hard philosophy. I want to take you back to just a few years ago when this all became part of my life, the idea that American Indians were actually very patriotic creatures, and that are people that have been grossly misrepresented by so-called Indian leaders. In the spring of 2000, after having taught at Oklahoma State University, Oklahoma City campus for 5 years, I became convinced that the missing element in all of my students, semester after semester, was a concept of patriotism, love of country. This became clear to me having taught humanities and psychology, ancient humanities particularly, the rise and fall of nations. What makes a nation come about? What makes it last? What's required to sustain it? What does it offer people? What is the function of a nation? How do you what is the social function of a nation? I don't know how anyone can teach ancient humanities for very long without those questions crying out at you, because you continually see the rise and fall of nations, some small, some big, and then the rise of empires. What kind of social phenomenon is that, as opposed to separate nations? So one night, one of my evening classes, I popped a question to the students. And this is Oklahoma. You know, this is what they call the buckle of the Bible Belt. And you would think patriotism would be a very conscious concept there. These were freshmen, sophomores. I asked the question, somebody just tell me what patriotism means to you. I'm not asking for, you know, an OED definition. What does patriotism mean to you? Usually girls answer first on a question like that. You know, everybody was completely silent. 45 students. Finally, one of these Oklahoma farm boys, you know, with the baseball cap on, they can wear caps in class at OSU, OKC. I don't know about here, but he said, Dr. Yeagley, we don't have a clue. And I said, well, just tell me what images come to your mind. I mean, the word must have some meaning. And he turned his cap around. You know, his thinking cap, it became a thinking cap, but he turned it around. He said, old people? Veterans? I said, that's good, good. We got a track going here. At that point, that was about a third way through that semester. I decided that I had to do something about this as a teacher. I suddenly evolved an agenda. No matter what class I taught, whether it was psychology, whether it was humanities, ancient or modern, whether it was intro philosophy courses, I go up to the board. I said, my name is Dr. Yeagley, first day of class, and this is my agenda. And I wrote 3 words up on the blackboard: love, truth, and patriotism. This is what we're going to learn in this class. I don't care what the subject is. This is the only thing that's important for you to learn from me in these departments in which I teach. So I decided that we were going to have a court. I decided that, oh, gee, if these young people in Oklahoma City can't tell me about American patriotism, then it seems to me that American patriotism needs to be taught on a mandatory basis in the Oklahoma City public schools. So I went out to Governor Keating, who was governor at the time, and laid before him my proposition. He was extremely enthusiastic about it. He says, give me a curriculum so that I can, you know, give it to the legislature. I did. And in the meantime, I feverishly worked to organize the studies in this humanities class so that the students would be prepared for the final. And the final was our mock court. We divided the class into 3 parts. Those who believed that patriotism should be taught in public schools, those who believed that it should not be taught in public schools, and a jury. And we had a judge, in fact, as well. Not a real one, but an attorney who was acting as judge. And the lead student for the advocacy of patriotism in public schools was the son of an attorney, and he was prepared. It was good. So this court lasted like 2 hours, and the students who objected because they were unsure of what would be taught and who would be teaching it. And it became very clear in the court session that they were afraid. They associated patriotism with paramilitary wackos. They associated it with right-wing, far right-wing, violent gun people that wore fatigues and carried guns. They associated it with skinheads. And one of the girls' chief arguments against patriotism in public schools was that it was a skinhead. It was a skinhead thing. They associated love of country with violence, with marginal people in society. This was a revelation to me. I didn't know that these students thought that. And maybe they just came up with that as an argument in the court. You know, they had to have something to say. And we interviewed it. I've got it on tape. I mean, it just went on and on and on because they each had something to say about it. And as it turns out, the jury, after considerable debate, decided to nix the teaching of patriotism in public schools because they were not prepared to debate it, they felt. They didn't have enough clarity in their minds as to what would constitute patriotism and who would be teaching it, who would control it, who would write the textbook. I mean, they went the whole 9 yards on this. And they said, we're not ready for this, so for now, we vote it down. Well, in the meantime, I'm waiting for Governor Keating to let me know how things are going out at the Oklahoma State Legislature on this. And it's dying in the water. With several weeks, a couple of months, in fact, without a definitive word on this. And so I asked my elderly, ancient and honorable Comanche mother, who was a political junkie, what should I do? And she said, why don't you write David Horowitz? And I will confess before the world, at that time, I did not know who David Horowitz was or what he stood for. This was in the year 2000. That's a confession. My mother did. She's a junkie. She's older, elderly, and a lot of elderly people listen to a lot of radio. You know, I'm a musician. I'll explain some other things about my life later. But at that particular time, I was not up on the latest politics like she was. And she had such wonderful things to say about Horowitz. He has a brain, you know, like that distinguishes him somehow from most of the people that are that she listened to on the radio. So I wrote to him. The next day, the editor, who was Richard Poe at the time, called me on the phone, and the day after that, we had my first article up on Front Page Magazine. I was identified as an American Indian who believed in patriotism. This was a curiosity at first, but as I learned more of the political jargon in the country, it made a lot of sense to me that this is the way Indians should be. This is the way all Indians should be. And I personally believe most are. They just happen to be silent, like most conservatives. They're busy. So they don't get involved in politics. But I did, because after I started writing for Front Page, and after it became known that Governor Keating was behind this idea of teaching patriotism in public schools, I was dismissed from the faculty at Oklahoma State University. Now, of course, I was only an adjunct. I did not have tenure. I probably would never have gotten tenure. Oklahoma has more adjuncts than any other state in the union, I was told, and definitely pays less than any other state in the union. And Oklahoma, the state of Oklahoma, outlawed any unionizing of adjunct faculty. So they got that wrapped up there. It's the slave class. It's the most educated slave class in history, adjunct college teaching in the state of Oklahoma. So I was suddenly without a job, and I was told, frankly, the unwanted publicity. The school did not want any part of that. And so I go back to Governor Keating. I start lobbying out at the Capitol. I thought, you know, perhaps I could, you know, work some kind of job up over this thing. And it turns out that my curriculum was reduced to 4 simple phrases in a bill: salute the flag, read the patriotic documents of the country observe Veterans Days. I forgot what the fourth one is. Just very simple things. Well, the House supported that 100%. That isn't really teaching patriotism as I had conceived of it. The House passed it 100%. It went over to the Senate, and it was killed on the desk of the chairman of the Education Department, Penny Williams from Tulsa. Never got off her desk. And I quickly made a raid and went into her office, not telling her who I was, but she probably knew. And I said, what's your objection? The House supported this 100%. She said, that bill wasn't about patriotism. That bill was about religion, and God doesn't need our help. Well, Miss Williams, patriotism doesn't grow up out of the ground. You know, it's something that has to be taught. We all have instincts for the larger social group. We all have these instincts, but it has to be nurtured, it has to be educated, those instincts. It doesn't grow out of the ground. Oh, yes, it does, she said. I was just at ground zero in New York. I never saw so many flags in my life. You know, like waving the flag defines patriotism. Well, I had a little bit more complicated ideas about what patriotism was than waving a flag. Although I waved the flag, but that's, you know, a chimpanzee can do that. It's got to mean more than that. So I came to a roadblock. The bill wasn't going to go through Oklahoma. All I was doing was writing articles for Front Page Magazine and getting into the depth of Indian politics and Indian country, and realizing how Indian leaders in the last 40 years have usurped the image of what it means to be an Indian. This is the passion that I bring to you tonight. I face, as an American Indian, I face an image problem. I think American Indians at this point are image challenged. Beginning in the late 60s and the 70s with the advent of the American Indian movement, the image of the Indian changed from the great warriors, the great and courageous, undauntable Indians of the past, into a professional provocateur, a professional complainer, a professional protester, a professional beggar, in my opinion. This I did not like to see, especially since I found myself representing the opposite. Why would 190,000 living Indians be American veterans? 190,000, depending on whose census you go by, that's nearly, that could be as many as 1 out of 8 or 9. I mean, the census on the Indian thing is a tricky thing to follow. But 190,000 living, and that's based on the 1991 census. You know, what about all the Gulf vets? I mean, it's going to be much, much higher than that. You know, these Indians are fighting under the American flag. Now, maybe they're fighting for the most essential element in a country, and that is the land. You know, maybe they're not even in tune to the Republican-Democrat dialogue. Most Indians aren't. I've learned this by experience. Well, look at my own experience. I didn't know who David Horowitz was. And I'm educated. Just, you know, in a different field, not politics. The fine arts. But at this point, it is very clear to me that there has been a new tribe of Indians develop in the last 40 years. I call it the university tribe. I call it Indians that have come and become educated, have come to the university campus, have become educated, and have learned the jargon of discontent. they have learned that there is a moral advantage, and usually that's translated into a political advantage, if you could say, I've been wronged. I mean, in a way, this is the way Marxism plays out in American society. If you could say, I've been wronged, and you wronged me, you're on top. You rise to the top really quickly. You have moral advantage. I have been wronged. You have a Cadillac, I don't. That means you have denied it to me, you have taken it from me, or you have made it impossible for me to get one. You owe me. There's communism, Marxism, 3 words. You owe me. Okay. What group of people in this country fit that bill more effectively than any other group? The American Indian, the unnatural commies. If you go by what these leftist leaders, these leftist trained Indian leaders say, they pack the hardest punch there is in protesting America. Now, you know where this is going to go. The recent statements, the recent issues associated with Ward Churchill at the University of Colorado bear this out to the T. So advantageous for a certain political sector in this country, found ubiquitous on university campuses, so valuable is a protesting Indian to such an environment, they were willing to pay $100K for a man that's non-demonstrably Indian. I started to say he's demonstrably non-Indian, but he's a demonstrable liar. We all know this at this point. He's been a fraud at everything that he has done. He doesn't even have a PhD, and he's got, no PhD. He's got an honorary doctorate from a liberal school in New York who he spoke at a convention. 1992 he got that. So his claim to be part of the Kitua Cherokee and his promotion to chairman and his honorary doctorate all worked very nicely together as a sort of a package deal. And his anti-American statements in the name of being Indian are insufferable to me. And I just take a unique sense of irony in the fact that, I consider myself a real American Indian, and I love this country, and I was fired. He is a fake Indian, he hates this country, and he gets $100K. Just think about that a minute. This is how valuable he was to an academic environment who either didn't investigate him or it didn't care. They wanted that authenticity that a Native American spokesman can have when it comes to bashing America, and particularly the Republicans. This is what happened at the University of Colorado, that in a nutshell. That's what it's all about. They haven't fired him yet. They put more advisory council meetings into I heard 7 months in the future from now. They're hoping it dies down. They're not going to fire him. And this business of people resigning, this is another thing that irks me. In the business world, if somebody resigns from a position or somebody's asked to resign, that means you lose your job. That's a serious thing to happen to you. On a university campus like University of Colorado, you resign, you just get a different position. You're still there. You didn't get fired. Furthermore, if I may be so bold as to slightly disagree with my boss, Mr. Horowitz, I don't think that issue is about freedom of speech. He has freedom of speech. I have freedom of speech. The question is, will you get paid for it? Do you have a right to a job saying whatever you feel like saying? That's what the issue is. I gave up my job for the things that I said and continue to say. Ward Churchill has freedom of speech. If he was fired tomorrow, he would still have freedom of speech. Nobody's putting duct tape over his mouth. He's not even being sued for the things that he said. It just means you're not going to get $100K for saying it on a university campus. So keep that in mind. Now, in addition to that fiasco, in the last 2 weeks, just since the snowstorm, I faced the Red Lake tragedy, the shooting tragedy on the Red Lake Reservation in Minnesota. As everyone, I assume everyone's familiar with that. This is, of course, a tragedy. There isn't any other way to describe that. But two things I'll notice about that. First are the comments and the response of liberal, trained American Indian leaders. Now, these are not tribal leaders, generally speaking. These are university Indian leaders. Clyde Bellecourt came out and complained that President Bush and the media did not give enough attention to Red Lake as opposed to the attention given to Terri Schiavo in Florida. According to Clyde Bellecourt, Indians deserve more pity, more sympathy, more moral superiority, deserving, the attention, you owe me, than a helpless, dying woman in a Florida hospice. In my opinion, Clyde Bellecourt has dragged, I beg your pardon. Clyde Bellecourt dragged Indian pride to the lowest it has ever been drug in the history of the United States. To compare Indian people with a helpless, dying woman, to complain that somehow this country did not consider the Red Lake shooting as important as the issue, the life and death issue in Florida, tells me that the Bellecourts, there's two of them, they're two brothers, and the other liberal Indian leaders do not know what it means to be an Indian. They know what it means to protest and complain and to say, I've been wronged. What happened to bravery, what happened to courage, what happened to independence, what happened to the concept of being a warrior, somebody that is responsible for the family, somebody that is a provider, somebody that is a defender. Where were the warriors at Red Lake? Where were the warriors, for that matter, at the Columbine? Where are the parents? You could call, yes, it's a tragedy. That's a different issue. But when a supposed Indian leader steps out and says something in the Washington Post, there's of course a liberal paper, and says that Indians deserve more attention than a helpless dying woman, I throw up my hands. This is Indian country is lost. The image of the Indian is lost with this kind of leader. Okay, before these events had happened, I used to do a lot of campaigning for Indian mascots. I'm pro-mascot. I think there should be an Indian warrior image on every school in this country. Rightly understood what a warrior is, we had the corner on it. Indian people had the image. And thanks to these liberal, leftist-trained Indians over the last 40 years, I'm giving them, they're going around trying to tear every one of these down that there are in the country and telling people that we deserve more pity than a dying woman. I just, I give up on this image. I'm image challenged as an Indian. There's only one of me so far that's bothering to be in media. It's sort of using the leftist tack. I got into media. And I have a website, www.badeagle.com, at which I hash these things out. And I write for David Horowitz. I write for Peter Brimelow on vdare.com. I try to write about these issues whenever I can. I will tell you, on this Indian challenge thing, the image challenge, I don't have a book. I was contacted early by Peter Collier, who is the publisher of some of Horowitz's first books. In fact, he was Horowitz's partner in years past. I was referred to him, and we started talking about a book. After 3 or 4 different proposals, it became clear to me that he didn't think it would fly. An American Indian patriot. No, something's wrong with that. An Indian who wants to save America. An Indian who admires the country, and in fact is willing to admire the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant people that created the country. You know, when you talk warrior to warrior, you don't cry about being defeated. You know, if somebody's stronger than you, ask any athlete. You're challenged. You know, you want to become stronger yourself. You don't complain about losing the game. I mean, how long does that last? How long is a coach going to let you complain about losing the game? You know, it doesn't work that way. Not in the warrior code. Strength is the thing that's valuable here. And I see Indian liberal leaders preaching weakness. I've decided to try to preach strength. I don't have a book. Collier said, he even told me personally, he says, there was something disingenuous about it. Okay, and this is a conservative publisher. Well, yeah, I'm sorry you see that way, but you know, he didn't want to take a risk. You know, who's going to buy the book? That's the point of a publisher. Who's going to buy the book? Well, about 2 years ago, I was contacted by a liberal literary agent out of New York, straight off of Fifth Avenue. Her name's Lynn Rabinoff. Among her many accomplishments was Abe Foxman's book on the IBM, how IBM was used by the Nazis to tabulate all the Jewish people in Germany and so forth. That was her deal. I mean, she's a pro. This is top level. She called me. Well, this is curious. What do I do with this? And so we talked. And it's interesting. Her basic reaction to me was, you know, she says, this is a fascinating story. How did you get like this? What's the story? What's the scoop? How did you think like this? What made you think this way? That's what she wanted to sell. She has not been able to secure a book contract. I mean, her contacts are Simon & Schuster, what was the big, Doubleday, Adam Bellow. I mean, you know, top publishers in the country. So I faced a challenge. The image of the American Indian is supposed to be somebody who is upset about America, who is angry, who protests. In a country that prides itself on spirituality and morality, whenever somebody comes up to you and says, you know, you wronged me, you know, you're basic American. Oh my goodness, you know, America has a conscience. America's got the most afflicted conscience of any country in the world. Well, you can get a lot of mileage out of you wronged me. You can get amazing things done if you preach that effectively. And that's what Indians have been used to do. And all I say, my message to the contrary is, not only is that weakness, but I also think it's cowardice and it's evasion of responsibility. Independence is the only hope of the American Indian, to work for personal self-reliance, independence. I don't think these are foreign values. I think these are basic Indian values. I don't describe those as white Anglo-Saxon Protestant values, although they are, but that isn't where Indians got them. That's what an Indian was before those people ever came here, spiritually speaking. You provide for your own. You take care of your own. You know, I will say this, that I do not account treaty provisions as the same thing as handouts. I must say that. It's a completely different historical circumstance. You know, Indians, basically the deal was, look, you Indians, just go over there and stay there and stop killing people, and we'll take care of you for the rest of your life. That's the gist of an Indian treaty. We'll take care of you. Okay. So the Indians do have this expectation. And being historical romanticists as we are, to step away from that is like losing part of your Indianness. As a part of what it means to be an Indian is what you inherited from the warriors that were your fathers. Those treaties were bought with blood, particularly the Plains Indians, but most Indians. Those treaties were bought with the ultimate sacrifice. Those treaties are sacred. It even says so in the Constitution. Now, do I think that Indians are no longer obligated to do anything for themselves? No. I'm trying to revive the concept of being what a warrior is, and that is basically a provider. It's not just the battlefield. I mean, there's lots of different battlefields. The home front is the big one. And this is where I'm sorry to say that Indians have failed rather dramatically. But when you have media hounds like Clyde Bellecourt telling everybody how pitiful we are and we need help, you know, what do you expect to develop? Well, you tell a young person, such as yourself or younger, let's say when you're in your early teens, you know, you've got natural aspirations to accomplish something. You want to be great. You want to be, you want to do something big. It's natural in a youth. And for an Indian leader to come along and preach the message, oh, you're miserable. You've really been wronged. You have gotten the short end of the stick. You are the most pathetic creature. You're more pathetic than a dying woman. I will never let Bellecourt's statement die. I will repeat it ad infinitum. That is the most ridiculous thing to tell a young person, that they're pathetic, and to make it a cultural message. And to tell them, oh, when you see an Indian warrior image on the wall, that hurts you, that degrades you, that makes you unhuman. And what's their slogan? Mascots. Indians are not mascots. We are people. Well, okay. What happened at Red Lake? Does that qualify Indians for being people? You know, be like everybody else? Have Indians totally assimilated? You know, we could shoot up our own too at a high school campus. Does that mean we've arrived at American culture? Give me a warrior mascot any day. Any day. If being a people means that we're going to be like everybody else, I don't want it. I'd rather be better, if possible. You know, always aim for being better. So, the idea that I'm telling you as an Indian that I face is this. There is a pre-established image in the media, on the university campuses nationwide, of Indians who profiteer on the concept of having been wronged. It's a business. You can make a career out of it. You don't even have to be Indian to make a career out of it. That's the Ward Churchill story. I'm trying to revive a different stereotype. You know, I'll call it a stereotype. You know, in the beginning we had Indian as host, as savior. When the Pilgrims, that little boat full of people washed up on shore, the seeds of giants. They didn't know it. The Indians didn't know it. It was just an unwanted child that washed up on the shore. Well, let's take care of it. Let's make sure it makes it through the winter. And then the thing starts growing. Get big. Well, the Indians have got to move back a little bit here. It gets bigger and bigger, and the Indians keep moving back and bumping into other Indians. We have Indian wars among Indians. And so then, from the image of host and savior, we've got the image of the warrior. It's a mighty image. Okay, that didn't last forever either. Finally, we've got the reservation Indian. And that's pretty bad. The idea that you're not part of society, and you're not going anywhere, and you don't want to go anywhere, and you get rotten meat and old coffee on a regular ration, and that's going to take care of you as long as the grass grows and as long as the wind blows over it. That's a negative image. The reservation image is a bad image. And then we had the new image of the casino, the crook, the gangster Indian. Okay, these stereotypes, they exist simultaneously. But the one that has been turned into political profit is the whiner. I've been wrong. That's the effective one politically. That's the one that the money goes to, okay? I say for Indians to have a future in this country, we have to take the position of the father, even if it's the adopted father. Yes, the bastard outgrew us, but it's still our kid. I mean, nobody else made America what America is. It was shaped by facing Indians. They took care of Europe, and Indians helped out in that. But the developing years beyond that, and the manifest destiny and all of that, Indians shaped how that happened. And I think I don't think it's a stretch to ask Indians to take a little bit more of an ownership attitude of America, not an us versus them, not they've been wrong. This is our son. This is our son. This whole country. You know, why can't we be proud of that? You know, why can't we take the position of hot dog? What a nation. What's wrong with that? That opens the heart to all kinds of positive aspirations. And I think it's criminal to take that away from a kid. You know, nobody's perfect. You know, no country is perfect. All you have to do is teach humanities a few times, and you could just see the inevitable error of America and any other nation. But I say, where there is greatness, there is great error. There's no escape. So go for the greatness, and whatever wake of disasters follow you, they'd be worse if you weren't going for the greatness. That's what I say. That's what I say to you as Americans. And I don't think that that's an un-Indian thing to say. I'm taking the position of responsibility here. You know, think of it as a myth, if you want. The latest mythology in American history. Indians are the father, in fact. This is the adopted son, and we ought to be mighty proud of him. That's the positive position to take. If it takes courage, you know, and I'm not getting paid for it. You know, I'm not getting $100K to say these things. You know, I think that's important. But I thank you for this opportunity to have me here to say these things publicly, and I thank C-SPAN for being here as well, because the other Indians that think like I do are not going to come out and say it until somebody else does it. That's just the way, that's just sociology. That's the way it does. And I'm proud to tell you well, I'm proud and embarrassed at the same time. Russell Means has created a new constitution for the Oglala Sioux, and it is a very conservative constitution. He joined the Libertarian Party, but on this last round of Senate races up in South Dakota, he campaigned for the Republican Party. He has some vision. Now, I'm embarrassed that, you know, he had to get buddy-buddy with Ward Churchill, you know, but I think that was a camera thing. That was his camera instincts coming through there. But his mind is far beyond Ward Churchill's as far as actually trying to do something for Indian people on the reservation. I mean, I have hope for Russell Means. And he's also Sioux, and the Bellecourts are Ojibwe, and they have a historical war going on between them. And if any of you want to really study about AIM and the problems that are going on in AIM, it's tribal animosities. It goes back 300 years. So I write it off as that. But Russell Means is ahead of them intellectually and politically. So I commend him for that. Now, I think that I'd like to open this period up for question and answers. I trust that you may have some. Some of this may strike you as completely new, some of these attitudes that I've given to you. I kind of hope that they are new, so that they can take fresh roots. But what is your opinion about ethnicity as you see it on your campus? You know, can I ask that? I mean, look at when I was on Bill O'Reilly's last month on his The Factor show. He asked me that about ethnic studies at the University of Colorado. I said, in ethnic studies, race, color, what did I say? Skin. That's the slang. You know, if you're not white, you're a skin of some kind. I said, skin means hate. See, all the skins of the world are supposed to have resentment towards the white race, particularly the Western European white race. I mean, it's almost obligated. You're uneducated if you don't have resentment. You're uneducated if you don't have resentment of the white race, of the Western white race. Yes, sir.
Dr. Yeagley, I was wondering if you could tell us more about AIM. I'm not too familiar with it. American Indian Movement?
The American Indian Movement was created by the same people who created the Black Panthers. It started in the late 60s. It was established in the early 70s, and Russell Means and Clyde and Vert and Bellecourt, they all claim to be, and Dennis Banks, they all claim to be the founders or co-founders. There's always competition over who started it. But they were violent. It was a violent 60s leftover crowd. And you can find an article on this called the flower child of fascism by Norman Grigg in the New American Magazine, as the best article that I know on it. Most of these people were half-breeds or less. Most of these people had lived in the white world as well as the Indian world. I mean, they're Indians. But what I'm saying is they were in a position that they picked up on white leftist communist jargon, and they were taught, and they were financed to do crazy things. There's books on that. What I want you to know is that, okay, the Ward Churchill situation. Okay, he was one of the he likes everybody to think that he was associated with AIM back in the early 70s. There's some document where some woman referred to him as somebody that shipped guns up there to Wounded Knee, 1973. Okay, there's no evidence about this. What there is evidence about is that Russell Means and Ward Churchill were the first accused the Bellecourts over that murder of Anna Marie Aquash. I don't know if you're familiar with all these details. They were against, the Bellecourts and Russell Means have been at odds since 1973. Okay, at this point, the Bellecourts are in the North Country, Minnesota, Wisconsin area, the Chippewa, or the Ojibwe, or Anishinaabe, they call them today. They claim that they are AIM. But what you have now under Russell Means and Ward Churchill and a host of others is what they call the International Organization of Independent AIM Chapters. And they are at war. Bellecourt's, when Ward Churchill said the things that he said about the victims of 9/11, the Bellecourts came out and claimed that this was awful. This was a horrible thing for him to say. He doesn't represent us. He's a fake. He's white. We've always known it since 1973. They condemned Ward Churchill like crazy. Well, I say their condemnation of Churchill's whiteness is as fake as his claim to Indianness. Because the Bellecourts hold the same anti-American ideals, they're the same professional bellyachers that he is. And what they saw was an opportunity to gain some ground, some clout that they had lost because, you know, Churchill was just shooting up in the academic community, in the media. You know, these people have to have media to live, you know. And I'm sort of playing their game to get my own ideas across. But that issue that exists between AIM is very, very dominant and prominent. You go on the net and look this stuff up, you'll see arguments, just unbelievably, endlessly long arguments between AIM leaders over who's sincere, who's real, who really represents Indians. None of them represent Indians.
Are there any books about it?
Yeah.
Titles?
Get one on Alcatraz. And of course, you could read, you know, there's different, Russell Means' book, Where White Men Fear to Tread. That's his version of the story. And you can go to their individual websites and find their own writings. That's the best place. Go to Clyde Bellecourt, go to Vernon Bellecourt, go to Russell Means, go to their individual websites. You can see their works. Yes, sir.
While one could reasonably critique this lecture on a number of different rational grounds, I won't even get into some of those sort of amateurish arguments that were posited.
Bad lecture?
In some, I certainly would like to learn a little bit more about the Oklahoma State University cancellation of your contract, but that's a different issue for a different day. My question to you is, rather than an image problem, do you not believe that Native Americans have an economic problem or that they face social problems? And I want to ask also perhaps why that might be the case, that it is, as you are arguing, some innate characteristic that's latent or inherent in every American Indian that makes them a whiner, because I'm detecting a slight whiff of wine in this complaint of this unnamed so-called liberal this, liberal that. It just strikes me as, frankly, just a very specious, very rank amateurist line of reasoning, if you'd like to call it reasoning. Ward Churchill is a respected scholar who's been published and recognized.
And accused of fraud and accused of plagiarism. And this is true. This is true.
Yeah, well, I would just like a few concrete comments from your end concerning the actual economic and social conditions to be found in American Indian reservations, and what you personally attribute those conditions to, or who you attribute those conditions to. They certainly didn't come out of thin air, did they?
No, they came as a result of Indians who did not want to participate in the greater society. I blame Indians for Indian problems. They did not want to participate. They were a foreign culture. They have different religion, different language, different customs, different dress. They had different everything. You heard the name Morris Udall. In 1964, he gave a big speech at the American University. He said, what characterizes Indian people different, what makes Indians different from all other ethnic groups here, and he was speaking of Negroes, he called them American Negroes, is that the Indian prefers to be Indian. The Indian does not have this instinct for assimilation and competition with the American society.
One wonders why that might be the case.
Well, they have the right. They have a right.
Decimated, a campaign. And here's my a second addendum, if I may, excuse me, just to add this.
I'm going to ask you to please keep your questions to a minimal.
Please.
We don't have a lot of time.
We don't need a lecture from the audience.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, we might need some factual basis for this, argument.
I'm listening for your facts, too.
Okay, here, Ward Churchill, for instance, let me just defend the man. His scholarship, on one level, has made a career out of genocide studies. He's an internationally recognized scholar. And his attribution of the genocidal characteristics of the settlement of the United States of America leave little room, I would suspect. I'm not saying that you're not a genuine Indian or a true Indian. Of course you are. That's not the point. But would leave little room, one would suspect, for American Indians as a whole, how few there are left of them. It's not exactly.
You've missed my point. I think you missed my point. No, my point is that a negative attitude doesn't get anybody anywhere.
Neither does
75%
unemployment and rampant alcoholism on a reservation. Okay. That doesn't get anyone anywhere either.
That comes from a negative attitude.
A negative attitude.
Okay. Well, you better believe it.
To listen to you. We didn't come to listen to you.
Well, that's quite clear.
Get your own forum, but don't ruin what I'm here for. Enough out of you.
Sorry, buddy.
Okay?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm going to be nice.
Yeah.
But stop.
I'd love you to be nice. Thank you.
Can we have the next question, please?
If I could play devil's advocate, I've been down to the Penobscot's reservation in Indian Island, north of Old Town, Maine. I've been down to the Passamaquoddy's reservation. There are some serious social problems down there, serious issues of alcoholism, serious issues of unemployment. The government has spent quite a bit of money down there. They built some houses down east, and the plumbing was stolen out and sold for scrap metal. What would you propose that the native cultures and the greater government do to solve some of these problems?
I did have a plan. It hasn't worked out. But Indians brag about gaming revenue. Love to brag about gaming. Last year, 2004, it was $16.7 billion. Okay, they brag about this. Well, that's not income for the tribe. That's revenue that passes through the casino's hands. Most of these casinos are syndicate-owned and operated. Less than half of the Indian tribes have casinos. They're not affected by this at all. And I thought, well, let's see. The BIA has always been big on divvying up money to all the tribes. All the tribes are the same. They're all Indians, so we deal with them all on an equal basis. Why can't they do that with casino money? I gave a proposal to Governor Schwarzenegger last October, because that's where the casino problems are really hot in California. I said, we need an Indian national bank. We even need our own currency, because otherwise all of this stuff there's no oversight to any of this. You know, if we had our own currency, if we acted like a nation, if you want to come and gamble on our reservation, you have to have a passport. There's ways for the states to make money off of this, if the state's worried about losing money to Indians. And it does seem, the reservations do seem to be a black hole. I mean, no matter how many millions you pour into there, it doesn't change the situation. Or hasn't effectively, okay? But I thought if there was organizational change in the way tribes exist and operate, if there was a business model as opposed to a superimposed bureaucratic model from Washington, which is contrary to every Indian way that there ever was anyway. And Indians it's just like rubbing sandpaper, you know, but everybody's so used to it. The people that are heads of their tribes and benefit from that money, they just kind of, it's a good old boy system, you know, and that's the result of organizational problems. Now, solutions, I mean, I'm including alcoholism, I'm including all kinds of abuse, all the social problems that you talk about have to do with two things. The fundamental thing is a negative attitude. Okay, if you can't see somebody drinking and make a decision in your own mind that I don't think I want what that causes, that you're seriously lacking some understanding of something. I mean, I made that decision myself. I've never had a drink in my life. You know, whenever I'm with Indians, everybody, you know, wants to go get a beer. So how can you do this? How? You know, do you have any sense of responsibility? I mean, young people like to imitate. I mean, that's what this is all based on. They're emulating somebody. Well, give them a positive example to emulate. What does it cost you not to drink? Because you know, Indians have got there's some genetic problems here. I mean, the highest lactose intolerant group in the country, blacks outnumber them now on that statistic. That's the latest 5 years that I heard, in the latest 5 years. But Indians used to be first, cannot handle alcohol, and have got the highest rate of diabetes in the country. That tells me sugar does not work with Indians. Sugar and Indians don't mix well. You know, simple things like that. Health problems, somebody has to take the lead. And I'm talking about Indian leaders. If you have to go to the federal government, which you preach is your enemy and degrades you, and beg the government to give you media attention because you've got a problem on your reservation, I mean, what kind of... This is low. This is low. We need strength. We don't need more beggary. I call these people like, I call the Bellecourts beggars these days. That's a new word I'm going to start using for this, the leftist Indian, the Indian whose whole approach to life is, you have wronged me. See, you know, teaching basic psychology classes, that attitude is not helpful. It doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. It doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. What's the solution to get me out of this? It can't be blaming you, because that takes the power out of my hands. That takes the will out of my hands. That makes me a slave. Sick of being a slave. Indian people are now, with leaders like the Bellecourts, slave to the media. I mean, what kind of monkey operation is that? If we deserve more pity than a dying woman in Florida. Let that sink in. That's to the embarrassment of Indians for eternity, unless it can be turned around. Another question or any other comment? Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about warriors. In my mind, that was a big part of your lecture. In my mind, the Bellecourts and Means and Banks, they were warriors in the AIM movement.
Yeah.
So that to me is a representation of a warrior, a modern warrior, which is the stereotype that you're perpetuating, which I associate with the noble savage stereotype.
I love it. Call me a savage. Call me a
Okay,
savage.
well, doesn't that place a certain mindset on you as a Native American man? I mean, how does that make you feel as a Native American man, first of all? And in response to the Red Lake Massacre and Shivo, the difference is that Shivo is one person, whereas the school shooting is more than one person. And I think that...
So it's more important?
No, I just think that there's more life, and it should have equal amounts of representation in the media.
Well, I made the statement that, no, I appreciate your attitude. I made the statement already in one of my articles that it's on Bad Eagle, it's not on front page. I wish there had been no coverage. Then I would have been proud. I would have been proud as an Indian. No coverage of the Indian thing. That's an Indian problem. You know, what are you trying to be white? Or you want to be Indian or white? Now, which is it? You know, now back to this warrior thing. I'm not saying that those men didn't have some guts. And once again, Russell Means had more than the rest of them. You know, he went down to he participated in that mosquito revolution down there in Central America. I've forgotten the details of that. He's not. Their personal undertakings took a lot of guts. You know, it takes guts to break the law with a gun, and they did, all of them. So I'm not accusing them of lacking personal courage. I'm accusing them of having wrong ideas. That's my accusation. Wrong ideas.
So how do you feel about Peltier and him being in jail and the media attention this is getting right now and recently? Well,
I personally believe that he was guilty, although I don't know this, you know. But just from what I have read and studied on both sides, I think he was guilty. And if he wasn't guilty, he'd put himself in a position where he can't convince anybody that he isn't. I mean, you know, the Peace Party out there in Los Angeles elected him for president. I wrote an article about that in front page. Yeah, this is what Indians need. You know, a convicted felon in prison, a hero of the left. This is not the Indian image that I want. Why can't we even be what we were before? I'm not saying, you know, step into a new level of morality and dignity. Just be what we were before. You know, you provide for your own. You provide for your own. A lot of those social problems you're talking about, no parents, no family. In the old days, when the Indians went out hunting or on raiding, sometimes they'd be gone for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. The mother had incredible responsibilities in the camp. Very hard work. The grandparents did look after the kids in the old days. That's because everybody else was busy. And to let an Indian kid go wild on the plains doesn't mean he's going to go do drugs. It means he's going to go, you know, find a rat to kill or a squirrel to shoot at or something. It's a different set of circumstances back then. We are living in a different society. This is a different time. You know, we're on reservations. We're not hunting buffalo. You know, we got the refrigerators when they work, when you got electricity. You know, the way that you go about living, the mechanics, the logistics of living is a different thing today. And the necessity of parents taking charge over children, this is what's lacking, as I see it, in Indian country. This is what's lacking. We're living like, and some of this is true in black culture as well. Maybe we should say tribal culture, you know, something like that, where you've got people that are trying to live in social norms in today's modern complex society, and it just doesn't fit. You can't live like that. You can live successfully like that, you know, 150 years ago, or if you're living off of the fat of the land. But you can't live like that today. You've got influences of you know, drug dealers, immorality of every grade that's very aggressive. These people aren't lying idle because they know once they got hooked, that's a source of income until the kid shoots himself or shoots other people, or is so doped up that he dies. That's income. That's why pornography, drug abuse, and this is associated with the casino crowd, by the way. This is why these people are so aggressive and why Indians are like sitting ducks for this kind of crowd to come in. And you want to know what the biggest problems are on those remote reservations? Those are the problems. And the only thing I can conclude is that the parents are missing somewhere. And of course, you can look at the general society and say the same thing. In a sense, what happens in the general societies happens on the reservations as well. But at least we've got a smaller group of people to deal with. We ought to be able to get on top of it, you know. But again, I'd say organization and management, new techniques of organization and management, I see as at least part of the solution. Any more questions?
I was wondering if you see any value in teaching American students the history of the American government and their treatment of the American Indians. Is there anything to be gained from that knowledge? And if not, how do you think it should be taught?
Well, I think there's certainly a lot to be gained from it. I think that it can be reshaped. There can be new information put into it. That's basically what, you know, when you only tell part of the story, that suggests a certain tenor, that suggests a certain conclusion. But there are other parts of the story that could be added to this. For instance, when Bill O'Reilly asked me about Ward Churchill's association of Indians and genocide with the Jewish Holocaust, I said to him, that's a false analogy completely. There's no Indian genocide. We're still here, for crying out loud. You know, you put somebody on a reservation, that's not eliminating them.
What types of information should be added to provide a fuller picture?
I'd like somebody to research this. Did Congress simply run out of money? Were the Indian Wars too expensive? Or did Congress have a conscience? Say, you know, we can't, as a God-fearing nation, we cannot commit genocide. For one reason or another, it's either, maybe it's a mixture of both. But you can't, Indians were not annihilated. There were people in government that advocated it. That's in writing. But it didn't happen. Indians were not annihilated. Some places, groups of them were. But the general trend, I mean, how could is this a leftist leader on campus here? I mean, there's a certain lack of comprehension of the overall situation. I'm here. If genocide was committed, I wouldn't be here. That's how I look at it. That's pretty simple. 1 + 2 = 3, is it? Did you have more? Did you?
Yeah. Do you think that there's value to be gained from learning from our errors in the past, dealing with this situation?
Well, I don't think the situation is understood adequately. I mean, I could say that as well as adding additional information. The information is there. I don't think is completely understood. If you take the position that it was wrong for a group of people to come here to set up a camp, I mean, who knows what the Pilgrims really thought as far as the future? Who knows? But if it was wrong for them to do that, to set up camp on somebody else's property, then you're going to take the Ward Churchill approach, because that's where it leads. The whole thing is one gigantic error, and one gigantic sin. America is the great Satan. You know, if you want to get the depth of understanding on this, it winds up being a theological question. You know, it winds up being best dealt with in theological terms if you're going where your questions lead. If you just go to the simple sociology of it, then I would say, as a humanities teacher, the spoils belong to the strong. You know, and if you are a warrior and somebody whips your behind, out of respect, you don't cry about it. You know, you could try to figure out another way to maybe, you know, a second challenge of some kind. But you don't cry about it forever. Not a warrior. And it seems to me that the only alternative position that an Indian can take besides crying forever, is to become a warrior again. And from the whiner, the casino crook, the reservation Indian, the warrior, if you walk backwards in history, you will eventually become the host again. And that is my dream, that Indians can manifest a patriotism, American patriotism, in a new and fundamental way as never before, and thus assume host of the American society as we once were. That's a fantasy of all fantasies, but that's mine. And that's basically what I preach, that Indians have a role to take in leading American society back to its original concepts. And one last statement, Tony, before I forget it. I think that Indians represent the one crucial element in any nation, and that is the indigenousness. You know, and America is sort of an eternal implant. But as anybody that studied the rise and fall of nations, where they started, back over there in Mesopotamia, the river valley civilizations, land, people come from the land. That's our Jungian archetype. Well, the only people that come from this land are the Indians. America has to have us, and it has to have us in the right place psychologically to make a real American, a full American. You have to have the Indian image in there, and it has to be the right image. And I propose to revive that image, develop it, and make it functional in this society. Thank you for your time and patience.
Thank you.
All right, thank you everybody for coming tonight. Just to give you some information about the club, we meet on Mondays at 7 p.m. in our club office, which is in 423B of the Student Union. Also, we have the website address up behind me, www.umassgop.org. You can check the site for updates. We have flyers for all our upcoming events and our past events and stuff like that. Once again, thank you for coming tonight.
If you'd like